Welcome to the Beacon Way podcast, hosted by award-winning executive team of Beacon Media and Marketing. With over 3 decades of experience, Adrian, Jennifer, and Ken give you an insider's view of what's working, what's not, and what's on the horizon for digital marketing. Grow your business today with the Beacon Way podcast.
Welcome, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Beacon Way podcast. And I'm here today with Chrissy Myers, and she is the CEO of AUI. Remind me what AUI stands for again?
Associated Underwriters Insurance.
Very nice. Okay. And Clarity HR. So she's going to tell us a little bit about her story and her journey. She's also a published author of Reluctantly Resilient, and we'll make sure we have a link posted down below for you guys so you can access and check out her book. And so Chrissy describes herself, I love this, Chrissy, as a chief cheerleader, setting directions, steering marketing content, and finding creative ways to disrupt the established business sectors of insurance and HR. I love that. So we're going to talk about today some of the ways that she's doing that. I also love that, Chrissy, you're big in the community and about giving back. That's something that very much aligns with Beacon values, with the Beacon way and all of that. Yeah, we'll love hearing a little bit about that, but you've done a lot in the mental health space in your volunteer and community work as well, which I know a lot of our audience comes from that background. So it's going to be a great connection there as well. So thank you very much for joining me today.
Absolutely. I'm excited to be here and get started.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, let's dive right in. So you've got a company you founded as well as one that you generationally took over. So I know a lot of people out there, they have that generational thing. It's a really cool component in my world, I believe, in America, of how we can have these generational companies. But tell us a little bit about your story about how that generational piece happened, and then what led you to start then your other business? What was the kind of like problem you wanted to solve, if you will?
Yeah. So AUI is 51 this year. It was a third generation
Wow.
family business started by my grandmother. She was a pastor's wife. My grandpa was a pastor in a poor
Very cool.
congregation in Sawyerwood. So her and a partner worked together. And then my dad purchased the business from her and bought the partner out as well. And they both
Mm.
retired and married my mom. And then I came along and it was, if you want a car, you'll work for us. If you want us to pay for college, you'll work for us. And I wanted those things, Adrian. So I did. And then after
Sense.
I graduated with my master's in business. My dad's, "Are you going to work for me?" And I was like, "No, I'm interviewing other places." And he's, "What do you mean? Like, you're so great here." And I'm like, "But you've given me every cruddy job on the planet. I think insurance is boring. I don't like what you make me do.
Mm.
I've cleaned toilets. I've taught people how to use email. I called dead people when you didn't know what was going on in your CRM because we needed to build it from paper files. Like, I'm not
Oh,
staying."
wow.
So he said,
Right.
how about if you give me 6 months? And I was like, "No, I'll give you 6 weeks." So in those 6 weeks,
Mm.
he gave me what I really wanted in an organization, the ability to set direction, to build what our marketing needed to look like, work in our teams, work in more on the human resources side. And then when the Affordable Care Act happened to us in 2010,
Mm.
we dealt with some major changes in our business. And so he
Right.
wanted to take a step back. I took a step forward, and then he
Mhm.
passed away in 16. My mom and
Mm.
I arm wrestled for the business for a while. I talk about it in Reluctantly Resilient, and then transitioned. I bought it from her in 19. And after I
Okay.
had purchased the business, I had doubled the business in size. So I paid way more
Mm.
for it than it initially than when I first
Victim of
started.
your
So
own
things
success. Yes.
exactly, things that you need to think about if you're going to buy your family business. That's a whole nother
Mm.
conversation. But
That is.
yeah, so I was 1 month into being CEO, having the keys and driving the car of the business that was AUI, when I got a phone call from a customer. And he was like, "Look,
Mm.
you have told us no forever, but I really want you to think about this. You do benefits so well. We'd really
Yeah.
like you to try to do HR. Would you consider being an HR consultant and creating an HR consulting company?" I'm like, "Wait a second. I just have employees. I just bought this business. I got to pay millions of dollars for it. And now you want me to start something new?" But I was on vacation and I was
Right.
in that space of, "Hey, let's think about it." I was in a program called Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small
Mhm.
Businesses in the process of building a growth plan. And it was like one of those, you know what? I guess we can try this. And if it doesn't work, we'll just never talk about it again. And so launched Clarity HR in August
Wow.
of 2019. So we have passed the 5-year mark, which means we are
Con-
absolutely a legit business. We now have our own team
Congrats.
members. Yes,
Yeah.
we're continuing to grow. And that pilot client who said, we'll never talk about it again if you're not successful about it, they are still a client and they continue to grow and be successful as well.
Wow.
So
That's a
that's,
great story.
yeah, it's where AUI and Clarity came from.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, that is a great story. I think, yes, we should do a whole nother podcast on generational businesses.
Oh,
That's
yes, all the
yes.
things.
Yes. I stayed away from my dad's. He wanted me to do the same. And yes, he just retired last year, actually, in November last year, 30 years.
Wow.
But yeah, he was really I went an adjacent line. That's what I was.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. I know. So there was what was the impetus for the clarity part? What was the problem that I know the client was wanting it
Yeah.
and the benefits piece, but what did you feel like you could disrupt in the marketplace with clarity?
Absolutely. As businesses scale, they get to the point where they need HR people. But oftentimes, as small business leaders, we need expert advice. And instead of thinking that we always need to call our attorney or we need to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars or a significant amount of dollars, like the average salary for an HR person is about 84 grand a year plus benefits, thinking that we could add that to the capacity of our business, we really just need support to be able to make
Mm,
decisions and feel empowered around the things that are probably the most important resource that we have in our organization, which is generally our people. And so I looked at it as there's a hole in our organization in that we don't have
mm,
HR, but we try to make good HR decisions, but to have that added expertise too, to empower us to make good decisions for a company that doesn't have, want, or need a full-time HR person. We saw a really big need in the market for individuals that really care and want to empower those CEOs and those startups to continue to make
yeah.
those good decisions around their people.
That's awesome. I really appreciate that. And how are you with the HR world? Because our world changed a lot in COVID. We all
Did.
know that. So there's a lot more remote stuff now. So how did you adapt to that world? You started it right before everything pivoted. And so now people are working a lot more potentially with people in other states. I know that's something we struggle with a lot with Beacon is the HR laws in Oregon are completely different than Wyoming than in Ohio. And you got what are the states where they're like Ohio, you have to do insurance specifically in that state. There's so
Yeah.
many different
Monopolies for
pieces.
workers' comp, all those fun
Yes,
things.
thank you.
Yes.
Yes. So like how has that affected how you structured the business and how you built it and things?
Yeah, so in some ways, it's empowered us to be able to reach out further. We have clients that
Mhm.
are local to us where we are in their offices if we need to be, but we do a lot of our work remotely and virtually. There are times where you have
Mm,
to be in person, you have to be able to sit across the table and have conversations, but
right.
it's really expanded the ability of our business to continue to grow. And one thing that I think a lot of times small business owners don't think about is that and you said it, Adrian, because you understand it. When you have different people in different states, you do have to follow the different labor laws that are allocated for that state. And that's
Right.
something that is often overlooked by a small business because we'll be like, how many employees do
Hmm.
you have? And they're like, we have 15. I'm like, that's wonderful. How many of them live in your state? And they're like, 14. We're like, where's that other employee? And they're like, California. We're like, that's a very different place than Ohio. So it's really
Absolutely.
important that they understand there are certain things that you have to do, whether it's workers' comp, whether it's workplace safety. Some of it is if you decide to terminate someone, different states have different rules as to when that last check
Right.
can be received. Some of them say
Mhm.
date of termination, others say it has to be
Right.
within 7 days. Some say same pay cycle. It really
Right.
depends. And so it's really COVID enabled us to be a little bit more empowered and being able to expand our reach and being able to
Nice.
help other businesses feel more empowered around making decisions for their people. So we just continue to do that, whether we're in person and we're sitting across the table or we're outside in the organization in a virtual environment. But we're seeing now
Mhm.
transition back into traditional work environment, having those
Right.
conversations, how to coach, how to performance manage, which continues to still be, I think, a challenge. And as long as there are
Mhm.
people in businesses, there's always going to be a need for HR.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. What are you seeing as some of the reasons that businesses are going back to in person or pulling people back into their offices? What are some of the consistent reasons that you're seeing people make that choice?
I think there's probably three primaries. One is the expenditure of the physical space. So we have a
Mm,
space, we own it, we're paying rent for it, we want
gotcha.
everyone to be together, we're paying for it, so we're all going to bring you back. It's important that you're here. We
Mm,
might give you the hybrid flexibility, but ideally we want you in the organization because that's something that we physically pay for. The other is culture. Organizations see a dip in the ability for individuals to communicate with each other effectively, to perform across teams. I think that
mm,
it's very possible to continue to manage things in a work environment, in a virtual environment, but sometimes there are challenges. And when you have those challenges,
mhm.
some organizations are looking at it going, it's better for us to all be in person. And we're not talking about little organizations either. We're talking
No,
about
yeah.
multinational, multi-billion dollar corporations that are making the same decisions. I feel like small
Mhm.
employers have a little bit more flexibility in that space
Yeah,
because some of them went back to in person, fully in person in an office very quickly after COVID, and
right.
others are still scattered and maintaining the work relationship that
Mhm.
they have, which is fine. And the other
Yeah.
one that I would say is productivity and visibility, and those go hand in hand.
Mm.
So
Mhm.
sometimes within organizations, you may see a dip in productivity. Part of that is falls at the level of the manager. I think it's the manager's
Yeah.
responsibility to ensure productivity, connectivity within a team. So if you're not being productive, I don't always think it's because you're virtual. I think some of it can be because of the manager. But that is another
Mhm.
primary reason why we're seeing a lot of organizations come back into the workplace. But one thing that I say for individuals that have always worked in a virtual environment that oftentimes are struggling with being seen, there is that out of sight, out of mind, especially when it comes to management track that you have to be aware of. So if
Yeah.
you're looking at career building, think about the fact that you may need to physically spend time in a space where there are other humans who are maybe a little bit further ahead than you are in their career so that they can see
Yeah.
you and get you in the right rooms. There is an importance in being noticed.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's an interesting challenge to watch different businesses navigate. And I think you're right. The smaller businesses, just by the nature of smaller business, we can be more nimble. We can
Yeah.
pivot faster and easier. And when we have to affect change, there's 15, 20, even 50 or 100 people to affect that change with, as opposed to thousands. And like you said, even across multiple countries, like that's a whole different ball game, which is really interesting to me. And because we only had 2 remote employees when COVID hit, me and
Okay.
one other person, and everybody else was in Anchorage. Maybe we had 3, but anyway, it was a very small percentage of our overall staff, and we pivoted from one day to the next, and it was incredibly seamless. I was
Mm.
very pleasantly surprised, but it was very interesting how it shifted our communication because historically it was our in-house Anchorage team and everybody else.
Yeah.
And there was, because nobody in Anchorage had to communicate the way that the rest of us did remotely. And so it was clunky. The first year we did it, it was painful because I was the first employee to go remote due to some of my husband's medical issues. And that's actually when we moved to Ohio. And so it was like, it was a weird conversation with my partner and co-founder at the time of how do you feel about me running the company from 4,300 miles and 4 time zones away?
Yeah.
And for us, it wasn't a choice. With my husband's medical stuff, we had to change some things and we needed the expertise of Cleveland Clinic to address some of his stuff. So it was one of those, we had to make it work. But it was fascinating with COVID, and now everybody was on the same level playing field. And it really created a lot of empathy for amongst the people that had been all in the same office to now be like, oh, this is challenging. I can't just pop into the next office when I have a brilliant idea that popped into my head. I've got to see who's available, who can jump on. We've got to conquer technology every
Yeah.
time. And yeah, we're very hybrid now, but it's got a very unique set of challenges that the culture piece, especially, we're always playing around with some new, crazy, weird idea to try
Yeah.
to help people feel connected. Because it is hard
It
when,
can be.
yeah, takes looking at it, I think, from a different mindset. But it is nice to be a smaller company that can pivot and be like, okay, that didn't work. Right turn. But there's a lot less people to right turn with.
Yes.
than some of the bigger companies. I know in your book, you talk a lot about some of the challenges of being a CEO. And what were some of the challenges for you that you had to you said build that resilience with and walk through? How did that kind of shape you and the leader that you are today?
Yeah, so I think a couple of things. So in Reluctantly Resilient, I talk about we were being in the insurance industry, we had a pretty significant change with the Affordable Care Act. So
Right.
it changed our revenue. Our revenue was cut in half overnight. We had to figure out
Mm.
how to um, sell insurance on a new platform. We literally had a bill passed, and Congress said, we will read it once it's done and once it's in. And then for about a year, half of that bill read as the secretary dictates. So we were literally
Oh,
waiting for the
wow.
Secretary of Health and Human Services to dictate what was going to happen with the Affordable Care Act, how it was going to be implemented, how things were going to work. So
Wow.
that in itself, we had to learn how
Hmm.
to pivot, create marketing content, really think about we don't even know what this platform is going to look like. While we're going through that
Right.
process, we had 3 years to go through that. I
Mm.
had married my high school sweetheart. We had two beautiful children, and he and I were just living life, moving along. And he dealt with a mental illness. And in
Mm.
August of 2013, about 30 days before the Affordable Care Act was supposed to go live, I lost him. I went from wife to widow, from shared parent to
Yeah.
single mom in the snap of a finger. And at the same
Hmm.
time, still had to continue moving forward with the organization because nobody called Kathleen Sebelius, who was the head of Health and Human Services, and said, Chrissy Myers has an issue in Ohio. You can't
Hmm.
have this go live
Right.
anymore. Like it doesn't happen. So life
Right.
continues. And I think that's something, especially as a CEO, whether you're a founder or you're a leader in
Hmm.
an established company, there are times where your life is happening and you still have to lead your organization. And part of what I would say is so important as a CEO as you're continuing to move forward is figuring out what are the skills that you need to build your own resilience, whether it's taking
Hmm.
care of your own mental wellness, finding a what else for your business, something that drives you beyond making money, and then building those
Hmm.
interpersonal effectiveness skills. Because it's not a question of like when difficult times are going to happen to you. Adrian, you talk about your husband and the health issues that he had while you're
Hmm.
running a company. It's going to happen, whether it's something with your spouse or a family member or your kids, or it could be a major change in your health. There are always going to be things that kind of knock us sideways. And as
Hmm.
leaders within an organization, it's our job to ensure that we can respond effectively to those challenges and then also continue to be that example for people and be authentic and vulnerable at times and be able to tell the individuals in our organization, I don't know all the right answers. That was something,
Right.
especially for me in COVID. I had bought the organization, I had founded the other
Yeah.
company, and 6 months later, the world decides to shut down. I'm like, excuse me, this was not on my bingo card for 2020.
Yes,
I had a growth
exactly.
plan. I knew exactly what was going to happen.
Right?
And we're going to go home and homeschool our kids was not on the list. And
Mm-mm.
it's that reminder of sometimes we just have to figure things out. And we also need to be willing to say, I don't know. And that was
Yes.
something, especially during that time where I had to be very honest with my people and go, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know all the answers, but here
Mhm.
are the things that are certain. This is the amount of
Right.
cash we have on hand. This is where our clients are. This is how we're going to work today. And we just continue to take it one step at a time, one day at a time, one breath at a time, similar to what I had to
Mhm.
do when I was walking through my grief journey when I had initially lost Michael. I mean, it was,
Yeah,
I don't want to say they're the same, but you use a lot of the same skills.
that makes sense. Yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely. I know, I think it's interesting for us entrepreneurs because I feel like we fall victim to surely so and so across the street from the outside they've got it perfect. It's
Gosh,
all
yes.
working and I'm the only one over here totally swamped and losing my mind.
Yeah.
And so that's one thing that I love about getting to talk to other business owners, other founders of just you never know what in the world you're doing when we start these things. Like
No,
there is nobody that has their shit together. I'm sorry.
no,
It's just not it's
no.
not the reality. And
It
anybody
is
who
true.
tells you different is trying to sell you something to quote Princess
Exactly.
Bride.
It's of the duck where you see everything's float up top,
Yes.
but you see the paddling underneath. That is, and even
Yes.
I feel like for me, sometimes I don't even look like I have it all together, and that's okay. I think that to
Yes.
to always act like it is perfect is to do
Mhm.
yourself a disservice because I know that I trust people way more when I know they're being authentic and I know they're willing to tell me when
Right.
they've made a mistake. I don't need perfection, authenticity.
Yes. I think that era because there's definitely an era in America, I'll say, because I don't quite know about other countries necessarily, but where it was that like strong stoic leader. You've always got your act together. You never show a crack. You never show a tear. And
Yeah.
that was my perception often going into leadership of that's how you lead.
Yes, we show no
And
weakness.
show no weakness. You're never
Yes.
wrong. You're just, you're powering through and you're dragging everybody else with you. The thing. And my dad, who's a therapist, which is
Yeah.
part of how we're in this world, one time he called me out on it and was just like, so you're going to accomplish your goal. That's great. How many people are going to cross the finish line with you? How many of your people
Oh.
are going to make it with you? And I was like, what do you mean?
Wow.
And oh yeah, it was intense. It was
That's
very
deep,
intense.
Adrian.
And I was just like, but we're accomplishing the goal. And he's,
At what cost?
but did you bring your team with you? Yes, exactly. At what cost? And when you cross that finish line and you turn around, how many people are still behind you? And that was a massive pivotal point for me of this. Okay, goals are important, but if I don't accomplish them with my team, have I really accomplished the goal?
Mm.
No, I haven't. Otherwise, I'm just out on taking a walk. And is that really a leader? And I had to say, no, that really wasn't, especially not the leader I wanted to be. And that was a big shift of, okay, I need to learn how to show weakness, how to own when I'm wrong, how to apologize. And that the strength that comes from that far surpasses that stoic leadership.
Yeah.
It's messier in some ways,
Very.
but so much more rewarding in the whole grand scheme of things. It's when you know you can be real with your people
Yeah.
and back and forth. And it's not, I think there's a pendulum swing. And I definitely had eras where I swung too far and overshared and was maybe a little too transparent on things that didn't necessarily need transparency and not
Yeah.
transparent enough on others. Finding that balance as a leader was really fascinating. And especially, I think, as a female leader, leading both men and women and different communication styles, different strengths profiles, and understanding what I share with one person may be very impactful for them.
Yeah.
But I need to understand that somebody else over here, they have a whole different set of perspectives on the world. And I need to share in a way that's meaningful to them and not just
Yes.
how I think it is. And yeah, that was, but yeah, the idea of, yeah, so how many crossed with you? I don't know. Yeah, that one was, yeah, that was a big transition for me. I'm very thankful for that lesson, and even though it was a very bitter one at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you see, like, how do you walk out that resilience and that communication in your organization? What have you found that works for you and in your group and the culture of how you do that and that kind of thing?
So I think part of it, initially when we first started talking about it, we made it part of our curriculum in onboarding and training.
Mm-hmm.
So we brought in a facilitator to work on those soft skills, building those interpersonal resilience skills within the individuals within our organization, which was super helpful because we did it the year before COVID, not realizing that we were
Mm,
galvanizing our team, but just those
right.
basic concepts of dear man, give fast, how to validate feelings, how to have a good conversation,
Mm,
how to have a difficult conversation. What is the term of
right.
self-care? What do boundaries look like? And the things that like you generally can sometimes do in therapy, but then not everybody's going to go to therapy. Not everybody wants
Right.
to. Some people go to therapy, some people go to coaching, some people
Sure.
do nothing. And so for
Right.
me, it was the individuals that I know, like as a team, not all of us are going to access the same resources unless
Sure.
we make it a point. So we did that within the organization, and that's been really helpful. The other thing that we've done is just, especially in our leadership team, is to model authenticity. So we
Mm,
know that there are times where we have to be stoic, but there are also times where that's not the appropriate use of emotion. So how do
mhm.
we model the authenticity? How do we be brave? How do we act courageous? How do we say I don't know and ask for help? So I think that's
Right.
a lot of it, and also acknowledging that I'm not perfect by any stretch
Mm,
of the imagination. I'm not going to pretend to be, and we need to be able to have dialogue. Gay Hendricks talks about so many of the problems of the world could be solved by a 10-minute sweaty conversation that you don't want to have. So
right.
we have those 10-minute sweaty conversations.
Yes.
especially in startup world. You're going to have a lot of those
Mhm.
conversations as a founder, as you
Right.
scale, as you if you're in a legacy family business and you're transitioning. I feel like that's 2/3 of what you do for those like key
Yes.
building years, whether you're in transition or you're scaling up. Those are
Mhm.
always the sweaty conversations, the transitions from legacy employees who look at you and go, you're not your dad, or you're not your mom, or you're not your aunt. And
Right.
I can't work like that transition into leadership of understanding and kind of having to part ways when you used to be on equal playing fields because you were colleagues and now you're not the same level of peers because there's a leadership dynamic. Those transitions are
Mm.
key. Watching at
Right.
times when you're in a startup that you outgrow people. And sometimes the best thing that you can do for someone is to give them an opportunity to be successful somewhere else. But that
Mm.
as a founder can sometimes be difficult. As a small business leader who cares for everybody in your organization and
Right.
sometimes spends more time with them than your own family,
Hmm.
you get attached and then you take it really personally. So, again, why you
Yeah.
have HR, why you have a
Fair.
fractional HR company to help you. But at the same time, it's those growing pains that I think when you have those
Mhm.
interpersonal effectiveness skills and you can care for yourself, it makes it so much more manageable as you're going through those ups
Mhm.
and downs because you and I
Right.
both know there are very high highs at times as a business owner, and there are
Yes.
also very low lows. And so you've got to
Mhm.
be able to surf both waves.
Very true. And I feel like there's almost no in between. It
I don't think there is.
No, it's just it's one or the other. And I know Jennifer, again, my business partner and co-founder, and I, we would hit these cycles and we're like, can we have a week where something doesn't change? Just
Yeah,
1 week.
no.
Just 1 week. Can we coast for 1 week? No.
Not America, and that's not what you signed up for.
No, not at all. Although somehow I think in the back of our heads, small business, and I'm not sure if other small business owners are like this, but it's like at someday I will make it and I'll get to coast. And what I've realized is I'm like, like you said, that's corporate America. And that's everything I started my business to be different than. And so I'm like, oh, I don't get that part.
Yes.
Okay. Nobody told me that when I
Yeah.
started because, yeah, there is no, you're never done. And
No.
that's exciting, but a little challenging and intimidating once you get to that point where you realize that reality. It's
Yes.
sobering.
It is. And I think sometimes it's really easy. At one point, people say, what would you say to a business owner? What would you say to somebody who wants
Yes.
to do this? And I'm
Hmm?
like, first of all, if you think that Instagram is a great example of what business owner life is like, all the things like they're on the back of a
Hmm.
boat and they're doing their
Right.
journal and everything's great, and they're handling a phone call, that may be happening. But at the same time, there's also this other thing in the back of your mind going, do I have enough money for payroll this week? Do I have enough money for
Hmm.
payroll if we lose a major client? I'm continuing to scale. Did I
Right.
get my funding the way that it needs to? Are all my policies and procedures right? I just decided I was going to hand off one of these major clients to a new employee. I really hope they don't F it up. All of those
Right.
things while you're
Yes.
still on the boat, fine.
Right. Yes.
You have to be. And the other thing that I think oftentimes we forget as founders is when we first start, we are the sales team.
Mm.
How are you going to continue to feed yourself and feed your
Right.
network and continue to while at the same time having sanity for your family? Because a lot of us do this when we
Right.
have small children. How do you continue to manage and grow, build relationships, stay married, all of those things
Right.
at the same time?
Raise
So I would say,
kids.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So if you've
Yes.
got an Instagram thought that I'm just going to sip my latte, all of the money and all of the ideas are just going to come to me, I would really like to know where that cheat code is because it has not been shared with me.
Right. Yes. I think that's like the whole startup culture of get a ton of VC funding, start a business, scale it, sell it. That's great and glamorous. That's the boat Instagram kind of
Yeah.
experience that you're talking about. I think it's done a lot of damage. I'm super happy for whomever was able to run that race. The
Yes,
f-
but that is not the norm.
no,
It's
it's
not.
not the norm and it's not really truly the goal. If that's your
No.
goal getting started, you're 1 in 10 million that's going to do it. And everybody else is slogging through the day to day. And anybody whose business is tied to technology, which is pretty much all of us these days, there's everything has exponentially sped up as far as the
Yes.
transitions and what used to take a year or two now takes 6 months. We laugh
Mhm.
in our business that a day is a
Yeah.
week is a month, and a month is a full-blown quarter if we're lucky.
Yeah.
Sometimes a day is a month and a
Mhm.
week is a quarter and a
Yeah.
month is an entire year for us.
Yes.
And that level of change and transition puts so many additional stressors on your finances, on your family life, on yourself mentally that people don't talk about before you come in. And it's, do we really, how bad do we really scare the new guys coming in?
Mm.
I think.
Yeah, because we
Um,
want new friends too. We want you to do it with
right.
us.
Yes. Come on this adventure with us. Come climb this unclimbable mountain. My dad always used to say that entrepreneurials were more like this naive dreamer than
Mhm.
anything else. Like there's something very, he used to say, broken about us in a beautiful way. The thing, he's more beautifully broken because anybody else, you tell
Yes.
them what they would have to do to accomplish what you're going to accomplish, 99% of the population walks away.
Yes. Which
It's
is good because
wild.
that's why we have employees. It's fantastic.
Exactly. Right. And that's why so many small businesses fail in many
Mhm.
ways because it takes this almost naive resiliency to
Mhm.
just keep plugging away every day and to look at this unclimbable mountain and go, yeah, I think I can climb that. Like most people are just like,
Looks fun.
holy crap, I'm going to leave that for somebody else. The entrepreneur comes going, there's a quote. What was it? Every fool said it was impossible, or everybody said it was impossible until the fool came along and made it possible.
Yeah.
And that's in some ways that entrepreneur of everybody says it can't be climbed. Why not? Nobody's tried it. Okay,
Let's do
let's
it.
try it. Let's do it. Everybody else is, you're crazy, but we'll come work for you once you get
Mhm.
halfway up.
Exactly. Show us that you
Yeah.
can do it and then take us with you.
And that's I think the beautiful dichotomy too of how many of your team did you bring across the finish line when you did get to the top? Because the tolerance we have for risk is very unique and
Yeah.
maybe a little dysfunctional sometimes. And that's not a risk tolerance that most of our teams are going to share. And
No.
they shouldn't have to.
No.
But understanding that and that affecting how we communicate and inspire our teams to do
Mhm.
the impossible with us, I think is one of the really special, unique things about entrepreneurial leadership.
Yeah. I agree
Yeah.
with you.
I know we're both in strategic coach, which is how we met, but I love some of their take on the entrepreneurial mindset and the free focus and buffer days of the
Mhm.
idea that I can actually take free time and that helps with my resiliency and that helps with the
Yes.
talk about a transformational concept that is so hard to wrap your brain around.
Permission to do nothing. Wait. Nothing?
What? Yeah.
No.
When was the last time I did nothing? I don't know how to do nothing.
Yes.
Yeah. I know I was in a different class than you the very first time, but it was fascinating to me when we talked about free time and they did an exercise where they had everybody write down what they would do in their free time. What are their hobbies? What do they enjoy doing? What
Yeah.
brings them joy, fulfillment?
Mhm.
And the amount of us that are sitting there staring off into space.
I don't know what I do. Yeah, the amount of people that were like, "I don't have a list." I'm like, "You don't
Yeah.
have a list?" I understand permission to do nothing, but at the same time, it can be hard. But
Mm-hmm.
yes, I was amazed too with how many people are like,
Mm-hmm.
"I don't know what to do outside of my business." Oh, we got to figure this out because you're
Right?
not gonna make it. I don't mean it in a mean way. You're not going to mentally make it if you
Mm-hmm.
don't figure out how to separate some of those things. And if you have kids, they're going to resent your business if the only thing
Yes.
that you are paying attention to, if that kid, that baby of your business is that child that always gets the attention, if you ever want to
Mm.
make it a transitional family business, you have to have that balance and harmony.
Yeah, that's a really good point for sure. Yeah, and that's hard to do when it's your baby. So, yeah, for sure. For sure. Thank you so much, Chrissy, for joining us today. Is there any last kind of nuggets or anything you'd like to share with the group before we wrap up here?
Yeah, so I would say if they're interested in learning about the book, it's called Reluctantly Resilient. It's on
Mhm.
Amazon. And the one thing that I think we had talked about before the podcast was you had said,
Mm.
is there anything that you would has been super helpful for you? And
Yeah.
I would say a couple of things. One is peer groups. So whether it's
Mm.
Strategic Coach or whether you want to look at 10,000 Small Businesses is a free program from Goldman Sachs. It's a
Yeah.
great program. But finding other business leaders, other business owners that you can bounce ideas off of and that can
Mm.
share their perspective, but also what it is to have shared weight of dealing with a business
Right.
and running an organization. I think that peer groups can be so important. I encourage everyone to continue to find their tribe. And Adrian, I'm just glad you're a part of mine.
Oh, thank you. Likewise. I know I'm looking forward to us getting to spend more time together in Chicago in a couple of
Mhm.
weeks. So that'll be really great. I'm not sure if this will come out before or after that, but that'll be really exciting. And yes, I agree that finding your tribe is sometimes one of the hardest things to do. And I'm really lucky with having some business partners that are part of that tribe, not alone as many business owners and founders are, but that tribe, you're right, is absolutely critical. So definitely check out Chrissy's book. And thank you again so much for sharing today, Chrissy, and joining us on the podcast.
Thank you again, Adrian.
Awesome.
You have been listening to the Beacon Way podcast. Make sure to join us for new episodes every week. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the Beacon Way on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.